Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. Today's flight is piloted by Randy Wright, who is joined by his first officer Jeremy Grapenton. We know you have a choice when it comes to your radio listening pleasure, and would like to thank you for choosing to fly with the Wright Flyer. Ground traffic control has moved us to the departure lane, so please be seated, fasten your seatbelts, and ensure that all tray tables are stowed in the upright and locked position. We will be taking off shortly, and once again, we'd like to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show as we soar above the friendly airwaves in comfort and style.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. This is your captain speaking, and I would like to take this opportunity to personally welcome you to our state-of-the-art radio program. We know you have a choice when it comes to your radio listening pleasure, and would like to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. What's more, we're confident that no other radio program or venue will fly you over the friendly airwaves in as much comfort and style, nor leave you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment, quite like we can here at the Wright Flyer. Now that you're aboard, please be seated, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. We've taxied to the departure lane and are awaiting takeoff clearance from air traffic control. While they go through that mindless bureaucratic red tape and regimentation, my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I shall delve into the pre-flight checklist because there is a lot of news and information to get to before we may indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. I want to start off with a story from Tom Howell Jr. over there at the Washington Times. Mr. Howell published a piece on Sunday, September 14th, discussing the solvency and future of Obamacare. I'm sure you will all recall when the president attempted to tout his monumental health reform bill back in 2009. In a slew of broken promises, the president was adamant that his health reform bill would revolutionize the industry and would drastically cut the cost of health care premiums. Yet, just like the promise that if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, President Obama lied about the number of enrollees for his health reform bill. According to Mr. Howell, President Obama's program will need to double the number of current enrollees by next year if it is to remain solvent. The target number of enrollees required by the plan set out by the congressional budget thing would need to reach 21 million by next year. We are less than half of that number. In fact, the Department of Health and Human Services calculated that as of June, a mere 9.9 million people have registered via the healthcare.gov portal and some of the various state portals. The Times reports that this puts the Obama administration's target ahead of the numbers for 2015. I'm guessing that's until it's revised, but well behind for 2016. Of course, folks, this clearly demonstrates the type of numbers games that Washington plays. They are never accurate with the numbers, and they don't want you to know the real truth. Truth is, when you make a program mandatory, people tend to resist, especially when it is nothing short of a redistribution program. When President Obama claimed that he would redistribute the wealth, he wasn't speaking merely of monetary wealth. Good health is also a form of wealth. Therefore, those with good health are expected to pay for those with poor health. Once again, this regime ignores one of the most fundamental American principles, that of self-responsibility and accountability. Self-responsibility and accountability are what make this country great.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about these numbers, and in order for them to actually acquire the numbers that they need in order to remain solvent, perhaps that's the reason why they've made it mandatory, because it kind of gives them, in a way, figuratively speaking, a fail-safe. They mandate people to acquire health insurance. They set it up, and if people refuse, like many people will, myself included, eventually will be forced to sign up for the health care so that they can achieve those numbers in order to remain solvent. But they're doing it by way of penalizing people with a punitive tax, a bill of attainder that was supposedly authorized as law now and upheld by Chief Justice John Roberts of the Supreme Court.
Yeah, and the thing about John Roberts is he didn't do this just once, he's done it twice now. And, Jeremy, I also think that this demonstrates why socialism never works. Socialism requires mandatory programs which are detrimental to the population at large. Taking money from hardworking Americans will never make the country great. Socialism never achieves its goals and merely spreads misery for all. Why people are so committed to the ideals of socialism is beyond me. It is clearly a detrimental system, and contrary to human nature and natural law. As we've discussed before, the United States of America is based off of a natural law system. Additionally, all of the problems and pitfalls that Obamacare has encountered are proof positive that it is against the natural order of things. The United States of America is based on the fundamental principle that we are capable of caring for ourselves. It is for that very reason that sovereignty rests in the hands of the American people, and it's only wielded by the government via the express consent of the governed. Obamacare violates the sacred trust of the American people and the government as it disregards the social contract that exists between every citizen and the government. In fact, Obamacare serves as a malicious act against the people. It punishes those individuals who do not wish to participate in a redistributive Ponzi scheme. Just as you were saying there a few minutes ago, how you didn't want to participate. And I don't blame you, because it's forcing us into something that is unrealistic and that is punitive in nature. It really is.
Well, thinking about the socialism aspect of this, the thing people don't seem to grasp about socialism works off of what? Other people's money. The government controls other people's money. Eventually, with a system like this, the people run out of money. They have nothing. You have total economic collapse. There is no money, and then what happens? The system is complete failure. And all one has to do is look through history at every single socialist country that ever came into existence or adopted the method of socialism as their operating system for their country and their government. Nothing but total failure. Some failed much quicker than others, some lasted longer, but the point is, the end result is it's complete failure. And that is not what our country, is designed for. It's not what the intentions were. The intentions were to have a perpetual building of the posterity of our country, as far as people having better than what we had ourselves. Our generation, our children, our grandchildren, should have better than what we have now. Just like our parents and grandparents before us, we have better than what they have. It's perpetuity of building something, keeping to the foundational principles and moving on with it and keeping it going as a steady helm of which the government operates.
And Jeremy, that reminds me of another topic that we need to address here, namely the General Welfare Clause in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the Constitution. Many in America mistakenly believe that this clause empowers the government to act in order to care for the needy. Political pundits deliberately misconstrue the definition of general welfare as used in its proper context within the Constitution. Indeed, they contend that the General Welfare Clause of the tax and spending powers of Congress gives government near unlimited power. However, that violates the spirit and letter of the law, as Clause 2 of Article 6 clearly states that the United States Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That is to say, that the Constitution states that the federal government is one of limited or enumerated powers. Therefore, the general welfare speaks to the ability of the governments of the several states to enact their legislation and laws and authority without interference from foreign powers, and to ensure that there aren't any protectionist currency battles between the several states. That's the very reason that the power to print and coin money is expressly delegated to Congress. Used in its proper constitutional context, the General Welfare Clause is meant to explain why the powers are being delegated to Congress and does not serve as legislative authority in and of itself. Yet this never satisfies those who view the responsibility of government in an expansive, totalitarian manner. They believe that the federal government should be the end-all, be-all, when it comes to governmental authority in the United States. Of course, that is completely contrary to the proper scope and application of the Constitution, especially when it comes to the tenets of federalism.
So, in other words, the General Welfare Clause specifically means the functionality of the government, how the government operates, under which the constitutional authorities that are delegated to it allow it to. And this is a great topic to speak on, especially today, with today being Constitution Day. To me, every day is Constitution Day, but today especially because it does signify September 17th, 1789. That is when the Constitution was solidified as the document. It was adopted, and then it was put into play. So, getting back to the General Welfare Clause, there's three provisions that allows them with the tax and spend. There's only three things. The common defense, to pay the debts of the United States, and a lot of people seem to think that, well, the United States owes, but no, it's to pay their debts. The debts being, and not included to, not limited to, the salaries of the elected officials, the functionality of, keeping the lights on, the water running for our government buildings, the post office, so on and so forth. All these things that the government has the authority to spend money on, that is why they are delegated the authority to tax the people. The general welfare embodies that. The General Welfare Clause is the actions of the government actually paying the debts, providing for the common defense, the overall functionality of the government as a whole. So when people think, the General Welfare Clause, a lot of individuals have this crazy idea that, the Supreme Court ruled that, Obamacare is legal, it's the law of the land, because their reason for doing it is for the general welfare of the people. No. They don't understand. They cannot correlate between the people of the United States, which is specifically mentioned in the Constitution, we the people, and the United States. They're two separate entities. The United States is a governing entity. We the people are the ones that allow that to exist. So we allow the government to be able to function because of the General Welfare Clause.
Right, and that's what it's always been, an explanatory provision of the Constitution. Now, I'm going to switch to the next topic because we have a lot to cover. This was a very busy week. This week was also the week slated for the second round of GOP debates, and we'll get into more detail with that. I just want to hit on this point right here from an article that Ed O'Keefe from the Washington Post published on Sunday. And the reason I mention it is because I got a chuckle out of it when it was asking whether El Jefe Jeb Bush could recover in the debate from the slipping poll numbers that have afflicted his campaign for quite a while now. Ultimately, and even after having seen the debate, I don't think that El Jefe will be able to recover. You know, Jebby suffers from the problem of all of the elitists. They are completely disconnected from the wants, will, and needs of the American electorate. El Jefe shares the views of other elitists that a centralized government is the sort of government that best serves the American people. Of course, as we have stated multiple times on this show, that is completely contrary to the proper scope and application of the United States Constitution. Aside from his problematic stance on immigration reform, El Jefe Jebe Bush struggles with the electorate in regards to his stance on Common Core education. Mr. Bush is firmly convinced that a national standard for education is a stark necessity for the United States. I have to laugh even further at this, folks, because if you look at the educational standards in this country from, say, the mid to late 19th century to early 20th centuries, you'll notice that American students performed far better back then than they have under the current system of more centralized control. Standardized tests are not a good form of education. Rather, they dumb down the curriculum for everyone. That's the problem with turning to the government for solutions to all sorts of problems. Everything the government touches only seems to get worse. Education is no exception to the rule. Centralized education just doesn't work. But despite this, Jeb Bush remains stalwart in his support of centralized educational standards. There's a tone of arrogance in El Jefe's stance to the issues, and I personally feel that that arrogance will never fly well with the American electorate. Just won't happen.
Well, this harkens back again to the topic that we've discussed. You know, one of the tentacles that is strangling this country, revisionist history, specifically within the schools. Now, why is it that when you and I were in school, and again, we're not that far apart in age, but growing up, I can remember, again, what history classes I did take. We talked about the Constitution, but we didn't talk about the Constitution. We never discussed it. It was made mention of in passing. Prior to me even being born, and you as well, I'll even go back to so far as before my father was even born. Back then, they talked about the Constitution. They discussed it. They had a working understanding of it. The Pledge of Allegiance was said in schools on a daily basis, every single morning. It was said with passion. Nowadays, you can't even get the kids. Some kids, and even adults, don't even know the words to the Pledge of Allegiance. They don't know how to behave. Their mannerisms are slouching. They have their baseball hats on. They don't remove their hats. They don't place their hand over their heart. It's as if they just don't care. And I can't fault them completely, because, again, this goes back to the revisionist aspect of it. If it's not taught and it's not discussed, and other things are taking its place, you only mention it in passing, and with each decade, the mentioning of it becomes less and less. Eventually, it becomes non-existent, and then you have those generations moving forward not having any knowledge of it whatsoever, and eventually it becomes extinct. That's what their agenda is. That's what the goal of revising history is. Remove the history that makes your agenda look bad, substitute with your version of history, and increase that incrementally, and decrease the original true history incrementally. And you do it at the same pace throughout a specified number of years or a certain time. Eventually it goes away, and now you have new history. And it's a big thing. And Common Core is big with this. The biggest thing is they want to have this new way of doing math. What's wrong with the old way of doing math? Nothing. It works. If it's not broke, don't fix it. They seem to want to try and fix everything because they seem to think that everything is broke. You can't do that. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Leave it alone.
And you're absolutely right. And you have to wonder why they choose to pick the starting points in this new history that they do. And the area that they like to pick now is starting it with the American Civil War and then going primarily to the progressive movement. Now, folks, the progressive movement was started under Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy Roosevelt had this idea that the government should always be more powerful than the private sector. In fact, it was under his tenure that the Sherman Antitrust Act was pushed through. And the history of that just is undeniable, because when you look at the fact that the United States Constitution was not developed for that kind of governmental control, and you see what the progressives wanted to do, you see that the progressives were diametrically opposed to the type of limited government that we have. And, of course, one of the biggest aspects of that is Teddy's push to create the national parks that he did. That was stripped away from private landholders. Now, they used eminent domain to do that, but the fair market price, quote unquote, that is given for that land is not, what its proper value should be. And that is problematic and has led to many of the debates and fights that have occurred with property disputes, even back for the last 15 years.
Well, you bring up a point about with the property disputes and whatnot, that enter in eminent domain. Now, I don't have a problem with the United States government utilizing certain property, certain territories, so long as it benefits the United States government, ultimately the people. If we have a stretch of desert out west that is, not protected, or it's uninhabited, it's just sitting there taking up space, and a business comes in and says, you know what, we can bring jobs to that area, we can employ people, we can make production, we can have an American-made company making an American-made products to sell to the public here in the United States. What's wrong with that? But the taking of people's property, even giving just compensation, to me, ultimately, that's a violation of our rights. We have the right to own property. We shouldn't have to relinquish our property just because we're justly compensated. Where's our say in that? What if somebody comes to me and says, well, we'll give you fair market value for your home because we want to put a radio tower on your property? No. I own this property. I want to stay in this property until I'm ready to leave, not when you want me to. People don't understand that, and they don't want to push back to that because they've become complacent. Again, revisionist history has taught them to become complacent. They're taught that, like the old saying goes, we're from the government and we're here to help. People have bought into that. They need to realize that the only help that anybody truly needs is at the end of their own arms, their own two hands. If people had the wherewithal to understand that nobody can help them but themselves through proper education, thinking clearly, being able to think on their own, coming up with their own ideas of how to do this and that, and actually fully understanding their constitutional rights, we wouldn't see things like eminent domain. Now, Donald, the hairstylist Trump, he loves eminent domain. He's amassed quite a bit of wealth with eminent domain. In a way, some people would understand that. You and I and various others that we know understand how he did that. His sister is a federal judge, a leftist federal judge, who's handled eminent domain cases. So he's rubbing elbows with people in order to basically violate people's rights. Now, I'm not a big Trump fan. I think it's admirable what he's doing by calling certain issues to the carpet and making the GOP elitists squirm. Absolutely. I would give anybody credit for doing that because it needs to be done. However, would he make a good president? Not in my opinion. Not in my opinion, because the issues that I look at that seem to be the issues that a lot of people have forgotten or don't even want to address because they're so preoccupied with other issues like the economy. And I've always told people the economy doesn't matter. The economy is not going to mean anything if you have no rights to enjoy the fruits of your labor. If you have no understanding of the Constitution, you don't understand what your rights are, only what you perceive them to be, and you have no way or idea of how to defend them, you can make all the money in the world. You can make $1 million a week, and your economics and your household income and everything that revolves around your life, that may just be hunky-dory until the point comes to where your rights are completely gone, and then people come to take it from you, and you have no way of stopping them. This is what I want people to get to understand. Without your rights, without the Constitution, the economy will not flourish. The housing market will not flourish. You will always see high unemployment rates because the Constitution is not adhered to, mostly because the people have forgotten it or they've ignored it.
And, of course, that was all by design with this government, because what it ultimately comes down to is control. So you're absolutely right, Jeremy. In other news, Democrat hopeful Hillary Clinton is in hot water yet again over her private email server. On Monday, WND put out an article stating that there is a 5-month gap in Hillary Clinton's emails during her tenure as Secretary of State. Her handling of the situation is increasingly being compared to the Nixon tapes during the entire Watergate fiasco. However, that's not the worst of the problems facing the former First Lady and Secretary of State. This 5-month email gap indicates that Mrs. Clinton has lied about turning over all of her email communications. Well, not only lied, but lied under oath. Folks, the political elites continue to operate under the false assumption that the law shouldn't and doesn't apply to them. They view all of us with the utmost of contempt, and Hillary's handling of this scandal proves that she is incapable of telling the truth. That, in and of itself, should unequivocally disqualify her from holding the highest office in the land.
Why hasn't she been indicted over this? I'll tell you why. I'll tell everybody why. Because this administration is not ready to indict her yet. In fact, I don't think they even will. They should. In accordance to law, they should. Lying under oath, especially to Congress, is a felony. Now, if they know that a felony has been committed, yet they don't report it or act on it when they have the authority to do it, that's what's known as misprision of a felony. That makes them just as culpable. They themselves are committing a felony by not indicting her and prosecuting her. And I think the underlying reason why is this administration wants to hold on to something. They want to hold on to the fact that they want to be perceived as a compassionate administration. They want the Democratic Party to be perceived as the compassionate party. They're always bringing up all these so-called attack on women. You have the attack on this, the attack on that, so on and so forth. And they come up with these catchwords and buzz phrases so that they can invoke the sense of, well, we brought it to you. That means we're compassionate. They're holding on to this. They don't want to prosecute her and indict her and throw her under the bus or bury her under a prison cell where she should be, because they want to show compassion. See, we can operate without, destroying our own. This is the unity that we want everybody to believe in. This is the utopia that we want everybody's eyes to be glazed over with. Wrong. The law is the law. You must adhere to the law. Failure to do so means you yourself no longer have any authority to enforce any laws. That's how it works. That's how the letter of the law works in the spirit of the law. I know if I was a law enforcement officer or an officer of a court or holding a position where I had authority to enforce law at any level, and if I failed to act on something, guess what? I would no longer be employed. In fact, I would probably be in prison. But that's just me. That would be my dumb luck, so to speak.
And it's also because, we are separated from the political elites. And so they have changed us from being a nation of laws to a nation of people. And that's where you start to get this interaction, this dichotomy within the government. Now, another interesting point about all of this, Jeremy, is that included in the emails missing is the period right after the Benghazi attacks from 2012. Based on the WND article, it is clear that government officials have not been forthcoming with the information, which is in connection with the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit brought by the watchdog group Judicial Watch. Again, it is really striking how much these political elites think they are above the law. If any average, ordinary American citizen had responded to a judicial order in this manner, as you had just said, they would immediately be held in contempt of court. However, I fear we will continue to see the song and dance unfurl as it has with respect to the State Department, because government, too, believes that it should not adhere to the proper scope and application of the United States Constitution. Of course, the government is attempting to cover up Hillary Clinton's involvement with the lie about the video being the cause of the Benghazi scandal. Now, I'm sure you all recall that in the immediate aftermath of the death of those 4 Americans, which included Ambassador Chris Stevens, the first American ambassador to be killed in the line of duty since 1979, the regime rushed to the Sunday morning news shows claiming that a video had instigated the entire incident. Indeed, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton further reiterated this lie at the funerals of those 4 stricken Americans. Investigation after investigation, headed by the House of Representatives, resulted in no direct action being taken against the former Secretary of State. It is laughable the way in which the government has handled this issue in entirety. The American people deserve better than this. However, as always, we are receiving more of the same. The same thing happened with the congressional investigation into the incident known as Fast and Furious. And as always, I'm left asking myself, why do we even consider the GOP an oppositional party? They have been derelict in their duty to the American people and enthusiastically give this president whatever he wants, irrespective of its detrimental impact upon the country and our constitutional Republican form of government.
I'm just wondering if with Hillary and Benghazi, if this is going to be another one of those depends on what your definition of is moments. It's just, it seems like the stage is being set for that. Okay? And with Fast and Furious, that's gone on for so long. You, myself, our mutual friend Nelson, we have dug up so much information in research, and we've tracked so much stuff dealing with Fast and Furious. How is it that individuals like us, who are not having the capabilities or the accessibility and are not made privy to certain documents, where we could come up with information, connect the dots, look at the timelines and the time frames, and put everything together and say, this is what's going on, but yet nobody in our Congress can. Nobody who has the authority or is made privy to certain documents has even come up with it. And even if they have, why haven't they acted on it? It's astounding. It's embarrassing, is what it is. It's an embarrassment that discredits the authority that the United States once held and was viewed as high prestige amongst other countries in the world. We're a laughingstock. France laughs at us, and that's pretty bad when France is laughing at us, folks. Think about that. It's very, very bad when France is pointing the finger and saying, those Americans, those Yankees, they don't know what's going on. They're too stupid to figure it out. Other countries have this figured out. There's other countries that have it figured out to where, and again, there hasn't been a whole lot of proof to this, but it's been alluded to that Benghazi was getting ready to be set up as a cover-up operation for gun running over there in Turkey and Syria as an extension of Fast and Furious. Why don't they want this to come back and to be exposed? Because if Fast and Furious, the whole auspice of why that operation is brought to the forefront and brought to light, it will expose so many people as being criminalized that it would shake our judicial system to the core.
And that is most likely why they are afraid to act on it. And you see, they are just so interrelated that it's impossible to separate them. I'm going to move on to the next topic. In other news, Pope Francis is preparing for his first visit to the United States. Apparently, the pontiff is slated to speak before a joint session of Congress. That makes him the first ever pope to address a joint session of Congress. It also makes him the first socialist-oriented pope to address the United States Congress. I guess we can say he's killing two birds with one stone, or is it killing two carbon credits with the hoax known as global warming? Pope Francis has bought wholeheartedly into the lie known as global warming. He argues that it is a humanitarian crisis of the worst sort. Pope Francis has already taken a hostile stance towards American capitalism. He seems more faithful to the gospel of Marxism than to the Christian gospels. His most famous encyclicals have attacked capitalism, stating that it is a form of unfettered capitalism which afflicts the poor of the world and makes them worse off. I think that the Pope should be more focused on the teachings of religion than waddling into political debates as he has here. Nevertheless, he is completely devoted to this issue and plans to chastise the United States during his visit. What's more, I completely disagree with the Pope. However, and since you had mentioned France, Jeremy, this comes from the AFP, that little French press out there. They've put out an article in which the Pope has claimed that he has never seen so many fake friends as he has since assuming the position of Holy Father. I wonder if it's anything like to the American Catholics thinking that the Pope does not truly represent their faith or their positions on faith. It would not be a stretch to say that this is the most divisive Pope that the Vatican has produced in a long while.
You know, I was reading something. I was browsing around the internet, and I came across an article, and I wish I would have saved it. But the article alluded to making the claim that Pope Francis was comparing the Quran to the Holy Bible, saying that they are pretty much equal. Now, to me, and again, this is just my opinion, I don't believe that Islam is a religion. I truly don't. Because in the history of the world, any religion that would have popped up or emerged and is still holding a foot ground somewhere in the world today, of all of these religions, Islam is the only perceived religion, and I hate referring to it as a religion. To me, it's nothing more than a totalitarian cult, a political totalitarian cult, because their whole auspice of existing is dictated by political rule. Religions are not supposed to be political. Religions are based on faith. Faith in something, a higher power, a higher being, whatever the case is. I was raised in a Christian home. I believe in God the Father. Jesus Christ is my Savior. You cannot politicize that. Many people try to do it, but you can't do it. The teachings of Jesus Christ and the teachings from the Bible are not politically induced by nature. They are based on faith and grace. Islam doesn't do that. It's political rule. You must do this, you must do this, you must do this. You can't have that with a religion. That's why I say it's a cult. So why would Pope Francis, and again, I wish I would have saved the article, and if it indeed is true that he made that type of comparison, question is, why would he do that? Catholicism is a branch of Christianity. Why would you equate with Christianity to Islamic faith or religion? I don't get that. I can't see the correlation. To me, that's like saying, you know, this individual is he's happy, but he's only happy when, you know, he has visions of bloodlust and wanting to, you know, dismember individuals. It's insanity. There's no rationale that can be placed to it for any kind of comment like that. To me, it's disturbing. It honestly is very disturbing. So with him jumping onto this whole climate change thing, I'm just wondering if he's going to try and convince Congress into making some kind of Antarctic expedition to prevent penguins from exploding over this whole thing.
And thereby causing the world to deflate. Yes, global flattening, folks. Because saying that the world is flat makes as much sense as saying man has caused the globe to warm. Anyway, Jeremy, speaking of religious zealots, the Gateway Pundit put out a piece stating that the Ayatollah Khomeini has released a video attacking the United States, and this comes right after the GOP rolled over and capitulated, giving the president everything he wanted with respect to the Iranian nuclear deal. Again, I have to ask why we even consider the GOP an oppositional party. Ever since they regained the control of both houses of Congress during the 2014 midterm elections, they have backed down from every promise they have made to the American electorate. Indeed, they have completely betrayed the trust of the party base. The Associated Press has also put out a piece stating that Obama is struggling to regain Israel's trust. That really isn't surprising, given the Iranian nuclear deal. On numerous occasions, the Ayatollah Khomeini has stated that he does not believe that Israel will exist in 20 years' time. Can we really blame the Israelis for not trusting the President of the United States of America? Unfortunately, I think it is a sound policy on their part, given the way that this administration has been acting.
You know, back in 2007, when it was made mention that Obama was going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party, the first thought that crossed my mind, if he's elected, he is going to alienate the United States from the rest of our allies throughout the world, Israel being the first. 8 years later, we're seeing it come to fruition. It's been coming to fruition over the past 8 years, but now it's more prominent. Israel, truth be told, they really do not need the United States. Truth be told, if they needed to handle issues in the Middle East, they're well equipped to do it. And Israel has some of the best fighter pilots the world has ever seen. Their mindset and their mentality is, especially with hostage situations, they look at the hostages as already being dead. So they go in and they do what they need to do. And do some of the hostages die? Yes. But because they have that mentality, it allows them to focus on the task at hand of accomplishing what needs to be done to stop that threat or that danger. Israel, I think, and I hope to God, I pray to God that they never disassociate themselves with the United States. Because truth be told, I think the United States, at this point in time, right now, the way our economy is, and I really don't put a whole lot of stock into the economy. I really don't. But our economy is in shambles. Our military has been decimated. The will of the American people is all but gone away. It's not even a flash in a drop of a bucket anymore. Israel has the right idea. They have the proper mindset. They have the sense of being that what our founding fathers had envisioned for us. If we lose Israel as an ally, which very may well happen, it could happen before Obama's done with this potential term, it's going to upset things on the world stage to grand measures that people are not going to know what to think, how to operate, how to react, and it's just going to cause a huge turmoil. And then at that point, Australia, Canada, Great Britain, they might just say, well, you know, if Israel could do it, we might just follow their lead. And then if the United States becomes isolated, cut off from any allegiance to any other country in the world, that opens the floodgates. It's the Pandora's box that will be ripped open for countries like Russia, China, North Korea, everybody that's in bed with these Islamic terrorists, to waltz right into the United States and completely destroy us. It's paramount that we keep our relations with our allies that we have, and even more so, build up other allegiances for the betterment of not only our country, but for them. But they have to be allegiances that we can trust. You know, speaking of the economic facet of it, Thomas Jefferson, free trade for all, entangling alliances with none. And I think what he meant by that was, have your free trade, do business with other countries, but be wary of who you align yourselves with, to where you don't become tangled with them to eventually cause the ends of the rope to fray and come unraveled. And that's sadly what's happening with our alliances that we have with other countries.
Yeah, and it's all because Obama is completely childlike in his application of his doctrine. He is so greedy with it that he just can't stop pushing on all fronts. And moving from the foreign sphere, or foreign theater here, I have another shocking story I want to cover. This one comes out of my own home state. The city of Lewisville, Texas, a little suburb of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. This story comes right out of it. According to the Dallas CBS affiliate, Whataburger employees refused to serve uniformed police officers. The employee expressly told 2 sheriff's deputies that they don't serve the police. Whataburger has already made a stink here in Texas when they opposed the new open carry law. Now, once again, the quality and character of the sort of people who would work for a company like that is coming to light. This coincides with a story published by WNCN News in which a Surf City, North Carolina police chief was forced to resign after criticizing the group Black Lives Matters. Political correctness has run amok in this country for far too long. It is beginning to have extreme impacts upon the country which are neither tolerable nor acceptable. I believe that it is safe to say that this wicked doctrine now literally has blood on its hands. It has cost the life of a slew of police officers throughout the United States, and it is high past time that this doctrine be relegated to the trash bin of history where it belongs. How can we expect our police officers to do their job when they are being attacked for doing that very job? This is the utter definition of madness, and it must stop. Every profession has its share of bad actors. That being said, I do not think that most of the men and women who put on a police uniform are purposefully seeking to encroach upon our rights. They face a difficult situation each and every day. And let's be honest, law enforcement can be a truly thankless job. Yet, in the aftermath of the tragic shooting of the sheriff's deputy in Harris County, Texas, the community came together to condemn the wanton killing of that deputy. As for those employees of Whataburger refusing to serve the uniformed police officers, they should be fired immediately. What's more, Whataburger should issue an immediate apology to the American people and to law enforcement agencies everywhere. Part of self-respect is learning to act with decency. Clearly, decency is not a part of the agenda for the radical left in America today.
Well, having the business background that I have, I this is a customer service issue, no doubt. But what a lot of individuals don't understand about the term customer service, it's not just the paying customers. It's not just the public that comes in and are patrons of your establishment. Your employees are the flip side of that. Your employees are what's known as internal customers. If you have an internal customer base that has no regard, no respect, most likely for themselves, let alone anybody else, and you allow them to continue to operate in a gainfully employed position within your company is going to fail. For the simple fact that if your customer, they are a ticking time bomb. Eventually, they will get so out of hand that they will pollute. They will basically be destructive to the rest of your employee base. It's like a cancer. That's what political correctness is. It's a cancer. The best way to get rid of cancer is you have to cut it out. All traces of it. You find the malignant tumor, you remove it, and if there's any remnants of it whatsoever, you burn it away, or you cut it out and completely remove it from the host. Those employees of Whataburger, they are said malignant tumor. They're going to destroy that company. But the company's allowing it to happen, so they, again, have now become part of that tumor. And as far as law enforcement goes, I have nothing but respect for the law enforcement officers and agencies. I understand, to a certain degree, what they have to go through, the training they've gone through, the various academia that they've had to sit through, papers they've had to write, presentations, so on and so forth. I've given some of those presentations and written some of those papers myself. I have a working understanding, not as much as they do, because I haven't gone full tilt. However, I do know what they go through, to a certain degree. And having gone through some of that myself, it has given me a new look or a new perspective into what it is and how they operate. It's created a much deeper respect for that position. A lot of people don't understand. Law enforcement officers, they are a reactive organization. All law enforcement, they're reactive. Protect and serve. People don't understand what that means. Their job is not to protect you from crimes being committed against you, because they can't be everywhere at once. They don't have a crystal ball. They're not omniscient. They don't know where or when a crime is going to take place 99.999% of the time. They'll get, once in a while, they'll be able to, predict what's going to happen because of evidence, because of previous crimes, so on and so forth. They can chart some things out. Their job of protect and serve is to protect your rights, not only as a criminal, but also as the victim in a case, and to serve at the will of the community, to do the will of the community. The community wants their rights protected. It is their job to make sure that that happens. That's what protect and serve is all about. And a lot of people don't understand that notion, so they behave like infantile deviants by refusing to serve a uniformed police officer because they have this ill-gotten, preconceived notion that law enforcement officers are bad. And again, that notion was inbred in them, impregnated into them, because of political correctness, because of revisionist history, because of this agenda of socialism and Marxism that is being crammed down everybody's throat. No matter where you turn, you allow the people to be fat and happy. Again, paying them at their senses. Bread and circuses. You make the people happy as long as you feed them and they're happy. They'll do whatever you want them to do. And that's what our country has become. That's what our population, our society has become. And again, I'm embarrassed because of that. That's not how I was raised. That's not how my brothers were raised. I'm quite certain, Randy, that's not how you were raised. We were raised to think for ourselves. Our word is our bond. We do for ourselves. We don't look to other people to help us at every turn of the way. We need to figure things out on our own. Call it tough love. No, call it responsibility and accountability of oneself.
And that's exactly what it is. The fundamental bedrock of this country is the notion of self-respect, self-accountability, and above all, self-responsibility. Now, staying on the law enforcement theme, I moved to a story which was put out by the National Journal this last Wednesday. They report that numerous federal law enforcement agencies have not used the current subpoena process in 5 years to secure electronic data from American citizens. Included among the various agencies citing a need to data mine the American population without a warrant, and this is even for civil law enforcement purposes. Included in these groups are the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, and the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC. Apparently, these governmental organizations need a refresher course on the United States Constitution. One of the most important unalienable rights safeguarded by the Bill of Rights is the Fourth Amendment. This freedom from unreasonable search and seizure has deeply held roots that run back to the very birth of the Republic. Yet, it is also one of the amendments that the federal government has struggled to work around ever since the Bill of Rights was ratified back in December of 1791. It's important to explain what the Fourth Amendment is all about, and in order to do that, it's necessary for me to quote it to you. The Fourth Amendment states, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized." Even though the Supreme Court has attempted to whittle away at this amendment for a long time, the express intention of the Founding Fathers could not be more clearly stated than it is in the opening clause of the Fourth Amendment. Our right to be secure in our person, meaning on our physical body. Houses, meaning the place where we sleep, even if it's a friend's house or a hotel room. Our papers, meaning our personal writings. Our correspondence, and that's a big one, which I'm going to delve into a bit further here. And then effects, which means our belongings. In the case of our electronic data and information, it's correspondence that is triggered. Part of the beautiful thing about the United States Constitution is that the language is timeless in its application. It is workable at any moment in history. And again, that's because the entire sacred document is based off of the principle of natural law. The Founding Fathers included this for a reason. It's because a free people must be able to speak and communicate openly and honestly, without the fear of governmental reprisals. And let's face it, where the government snoops into our private communications or gathers information on us outside the scope of the United States Constitution, they are acting in an unlawful manner. Why should the government be given an unfettered hand to pry into the lives of law-abiding American citizens? The answer, of course, is that they should not. And the Founding Fathers felt so strongly about this that they stated a warrant could not be issued without two things. One, that it be based on an oath or affirmation establishing probable cause, and two, that this probable cause must state in no uncertain terms the place, person, or things to be searched and or seized.
Well, you see, when we get into issues like this, of course, the first thing that pops into my head is NSA. And then, of course, we have dealings like the Patriot Act, the undaunting continuance of trying to implement the Net Neutrality Act. Why did they want to take this away from people? Because the one thing you didn't mention that ties all of that into it is the ability of an individual to think freely. If they could take away and search our persons, our homes, our effects, our property, and take all that away, the only thing that they have not taken from us is what's in our minds. And eventually, they will try to take that too. Now, people would say, oh, that just, you're sounding like this, George Norrie conspiracy theorist guy. No, I'm not. Because for the simple fact is, the only way they will be able to have access to that is when we speak. And when we speak, we automatically invoke the First Amendment. We have the freedom of speech. We could say whatever we want. wherever we want, so long as we are willing to accept the responsibility for our action. That's the caveat that comes with exercising our rights. You have to be willing to accept the responsibility for it. We've brought up the example of yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. If nothing happens of that, if nobody gets up and starts running around in panic mode and nobody gets hurt, where's the crime that was committed? There is no crime because there was no injury or damage sustained. Flip side, people panic, someone gets trampled, someone dies, whatever. Now you're on the hook for criminal charges because your exercising of your free speech has caused the interference or the infringement on another individual's rights. That's what people don't understand. Our rights end where other rights begin, and vice versa. Okay? With the Fourth Amendment, this speaks volumes to the federal government thinking that they have the authority outside of the scope of the Constitution that was delegated to them. They're perceiving this authority as being a right given to them. The government has no rights. States have no rights as a governing entity. The United States does not have any rights as a governing entity. They're beholden by the rights of the people. When they utilize their delegated authorities to infringe upon the rights of the people, they forfeit that authority because you cannot infringe upon the rights of individuals for any reason whatsoever. In fact, we have federal laws against that. Two of them come to mind. Title 18 U.S. Code, Section 241 and Section 242. Conspiracy against rights, and then rights violated of the individual. You cannot do anything to intimidate, threaten, or remove an individual's rights just because you think you have the authority and you're perceiving your authority to be a right in and of itself. You just can't do it. It's impossible. It defies all logic of the founding principles of what this country was established for.
And you know, Jeremy, this also leads back to another point that we have continually raised here on the Wright Flyer, namely that when you attempt to interpret the Constitution, you are actually engaging in a process of re-engineering the Constitution or rewriting it. That's actually emphatically and specifically forbade by the Ninth Amendment. Again, this is a case of where the Constitution should be applied, not as the courts have started with judicial review dating all the way back to 1803 in Marbury versus Madison, interpreting. Based on the language contained within the four corners of the Constitution, it is undeniably clear that the federal government, when gathering information from and about American citizens, must have probable cause that said American citizens have somehow violated the law, and they must first secure a warrant before gathering this information. There really should not be a way around that. It's stated in no uncertain terms. Yet, when the judiciary engages in interpretation through the process known as judicial review, we see that they change the meaning of what was intended by the Constitution. That, in and of itself, violates the United States Constitution.
And thus, in violating the Constitution, it removes them of having any authority whatsoever, especially in the judicial branch, because they're bound. They are bound to the Constitution to support it. How can you support something, take an oath, and be bound by law to support something when you directly oppose it by having these actions? You can't support something all while at the same time breaking it down. It's physically impossible. physically impossible, emotionally impossible, spiritually impossible. It cannot be done. To do it and have it go unchecked would be akin to unmaking the universe, in a manner of speaking. It just dissolves it creates nothing but a void of emptiness. And when you have emptiness in the letter of the law, and when the Constitution is cast aside and there's nothing there, you have emptiness. You don't even have anarchy. You don't even have totalitarian. There's nothing there. It's nothingness. It's empty. It's like a vacuum has been created, and everything just is gone, like a giant black hole.
And it consumes everything, as you said. Of course, this all ties into the sorts of attacks we have seen on all of our fundamental rights. It reminds me of the debate that occurred between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists before the Bill of Rights had been ratified. Many of the Federalists were of the position that no Bill of Rights was necessary because the Constitution already safeguarded our rights. However, a strong contingent of Anti-Federalists and a few well-known Federalists, including James Madison, saw the need for its inclusion. They recalled what sorts of things happen when a part of a government's foundational creed goes unwritten. After all, the notion of representation from the colonies was an unwritten part of the British Constitution. When things are left in the mere abstract, it is exceedingly easy for the government to change the meaning and intent behind the stated purpose of government. By including the Bill of Rights and also the Ninth Amendment, the Founding Fathers solidified the meaning of the rights and even provided a greater protection for the rights which weren't listed there. They proved to be so forward-thinking that it gave the Constitution the sort of adaptability which has allowed it to become the longest contiguously standing Constitution in the history of the world. That's quite an achievement. And what's more, it points to the fact that it is not a living document. Because if it were living, it would act more like the British Constitution did at the time of the American Revolution. The Founding Fathers understood the need for having a concrete basis upon which our government is constructed. When that base or foundation is tampered with, the entire credibility and stability of our Republican form of government and the tenets of federalism are directly undermined.
Well, this opens up the doors as to an explanation of why other countries hate us. Other entities of the world hate us. They hate the way that our country was envisioned. You have these radical Islamic jihadists, these rogue elements. They want nothing but total domination of the world, and they want their Sharia law implemented. Well, too bad, so sad for them, because as long as I'm breathing, I will go to the ends of the earth to make sure that that does not happen here in the United States. Because it cannot happen. We have the United States Constitution, the supreme law of the land. It is our supreme doctrine of which all laws in this country are based on. When you want to bring in something like Sharia law and to try and trump it or make different doctrines flow into place, you can't do it. Nothing here in the United States, as far as law goes, trumps the Constitution. Judicial rulings don't trump the Constitution. Legislative acts don't trump the Constitution. That's why in one of our other shows, in our Constitution series, we talk about the preamble of the Bill of Rights. You know, the preamble of the Bill of Rights, it specifically names articles and amendments to the Constitution that are adopted and ratified after that point in time to carry the full weight and all intents and purposes of the Constitution, meaning they become absorbed into the Constitution and carry the full weight as the supreme law of the land. Failure to understand that and failure to recognize that allows the continued brewing of people thinking it's okay to implement Sharia law, or it's okay to say, well, the Supreme Court made the ruling and now that's the law of the land. No. I've had several debates. I take that back. I wouldn't call them debates. Having a debate requires two parties on opposite sides actually being able to adhere to and formulate factual, logical statements. I've had arguments with other individuals who say that Supreme Court justices, they serve on the bench as a lifelong appointment. That you can't impeach them. They can't be removed until they die. Wrong. They only serve under one auspice under the Constitution, under good behavior. When they take that oath that makes them bound to the Constitution as being the supreme law of the land, anything outside of that is contrary to the Constitution is exhibitive of bad behavior. When they make a ruling that violates the constitutional rights of individuals, that is no different than a person exercising their rights and committing a crime. And when I say exercising your rights to commit a crime, people need to understand what that means. We use the Second Amendment. You have the right to keep and bear arms. When you have firearms and you're a firearms owner, if you purchase a firearm legally, everything's on the up and up, and you decide that you're going to go out and you're going to use that in a malicious fashion to infringe upon or violate somebody else's rights, that's what's known as a crime. When the Supreme Court makes a ruling that violates people's rights, that too is a crime. But people seem to have this notion that the Supreme Court can go unchecked, they're not held accountable, that there's no consequences that can be suffered for them committing a crime with their rulings and violating our rights. But there is, and people don't want to accept the fact they can be impeached. They can be removed from the bench. They, in fact, can actually come under scrutiny and prosecution and face prison time. They absolutely can. And I give the example of Samuel Chase back in 1805. If people say, well, he was, impeached, he went through the process. He was never removed from the bench. He went through the process. That means it can be done. Why? Because his perceived behavior by some individuals was considered to be bad behavior. Those individuals happen to be members of Congress. Congress determines what good and bad behavior is. And violating the Constitution in any way, shape, or form because you are violating the rights of others is the ultimate bad behavior that anybody could ever do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, we come to the second GOP debate for 2016. This time, the event was hosted by CNN. True to CNN form, the moderators of the debate acted in a completely one-sided, biased fashion. The time breakdown of the event gave nearly half of all the airtime to Trump and hardly any to Ted Cruz. Again, having so many candidates on stage made it difficult for any of the candidates to really have a say. What's more, the debate platform style was nearly worthless. Timekeepers were continually attempting to shout over the candidate as they spoke, and I was really displeased with the sort of playground bully routine adopted by the moderators. We don't care about the candidates fighting with each other. That's what all the other time away from the debates is for. This should have been focused on their policy plans and an examination of exactly how they would handle the tough sort of issues that we would expect a president to be able to handle in a tough situation. Yet we got nothing of the sort from these moderators. They were far too busy attempting to score political points and dragging the candidates through the mud. That said, there are a couple of points which the candidates addressed that I want to get into here. First and foremost is the whole notion of a fair tax. Folks, we here at the Wright Flyer believe that the solution to the taxation problem in the United States is rooted squarely in the United States Constitution itself. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 clearly states what sort of taxes Congress may levy and how they may levy them. This system served the country well for the first half of its existence, and when we got away from the constitutionally authorized form of taxation, the mess began. A lot can be said about the 16th Amendment. It was and continues to be one of the most controversial amendments to the United States Constitution. Worse yet, it has been construed in such a way as to give the Internal Revenue Service, or IRS, extremely expansive powers. That, in turn, has led us to the development of the Revenue Code, which is an unmitigated disaster. Of course, the true fix would be to go back to the proper constraints as codified in Article 1, Section 8. Yet, at least at this point in time, there's no political will by the powers that be, nor by the numerous candidates to adopt such a policy.
Well, I'll speak to Ted Cruz and what he said last night. And I think there was a couple of other candidates, maybe one or two, that mentioned a flat tax. Now, what people need to understand is with the fair tax is a VAT tax. It's a value-added tax. They need to understand how this works, okay? When you have an organization that builds or manufactures a product, a widget, the costs that they incur on that, they pass it down, they add it to the price, and then they pass it down to the consumer, and so on down the line. Okay? It goes from the stage of obtaining the raw materials, purchasing it there, they pay a value-added tax on that. Then their cost of production, then their cost of marketing, all that stuff plays a figure, and it's just value added and added and added all the way down. Now, the problem with this is what our friend Nelson pointed out so very long ago, is that it gives Congress the authority to oversee this, which means that if there's something in production that the federal government or Congress does not feel the American people should have, like firearms, they make it so expensive because of the fair tax, the value-added tax, to where people cannot procure that item. They can't afford to buy it. So therefore, if not enough people can purchase the merchandise, this is again is business 101. If you do not have enough customers to purchase your product, what happens to your business? You fold up shop and you go away. You're no longer in existence because you cannot make ends meet. You are no longer a viable company. That's what the fair tax will do. It's not just beholden to firearms, but ammunition. Hell, let's even talk about the internal combustion engine. With this whole movement of going green and this whole climate change farce that's going on, that is what's going to be used to get rid of the internal combustion engine, because it greenhouse gases, it does this, does that. No. Again, it is something that is not broke. Don't fix it. Now, with the flat tax, I believe Ben Carson actually is a proponent of the flat tax as well. It's based on, like Ben Carson said last night in the debates, a biblical type of stature. You know what? To me, I would not like to see a flat tax any higher than 9%. I would not like to see one at 10% or above, because the Bible says God requires 1% or 10% for tithing. Now, if we go 10% or above, that's just setting it up for failure, because now you're going to have these individuals that are running roughshod over this, thinking, well, the federal government is getting 10%. We're godlike now. It will create a godlike, a demigod type scenario for them, to where they will think that they are, masters over everybody. Put it at 9%, that removes that equation. Although you still will have some individuals that are completely gone off the deep end that think they are godlike, like we have some individuals now. But I digress. Flat tax, everybody pays the same rate. And the argument against it is, well, you have a person that makes $10 billion, they only pay $1 billion in taxes. They're paying more, but other people, make $100,000, only pay $10,000. They're not paying equal shares. Well, yes, they are. It's just different increments. Because numbers are numbers. 1 equals 1, period. It doesn't matter how many zeros you put past it. As far as the incrementalization goes for it, they are still paying, in essence, the same capacity. 10% is 10%, period. So that argument gets thrown right out the window. And why punish somebody for making $10 billion a year? What's stopping another individual who's only making $100,000 a year from achieving that level or having the opportunity to make $10 billion a year? That's not my issue. It's not my prerogative or responsibility to help that person achieve that level. No, that falls directly on that individual. That's under their capabilities, their understanding, and their ambition to actually strive to make $10 billion a year. I wish I made $10 billion a year. It'd be a great thing. But it wouldn't stop me from wanting to make more, because I'm an evil capitalist pig. I understand how this works. I don't love money. I have no love for things. I'm not looking at buying happiness. I want to be able to do things. To me, money is a tool. And when people understand that, they develop the ambition. Say, you know what? I want to get a better education. I want to learn a better skill set, improve my skills. I want to get out there. I want to do this. Everybody has the opportunity. This is what equal opportunity is all about. Everybody has the equal opportunity to make $10 billion a year. Problem is, a lot of people are overwhelmed with and inundated with laziness. And they get set back. They don't want to get rid of the laziness, and they don't want to be ambitious and go out and do what they need to do.
Yeah, and that's right. Now, there's another thing, Jeremy, which I was rather surprised about. When Donald Trump addressed the 14th Amendment issue, especially the anchor baby part, that's what it's all coming down to, at least in his discussion of it. He stated that he spoke with a fair number of legal scholars who argued that the anchor baby issue wouldn't require any change to the amendment at all. That's something both you and I have said for a long while, and it's absolutely true. If you go back to the original intent of the drafters of the 14th Amendment, it was not meant to allow citizenship to those who were foreign citizens. Rather, it was addressing former slaves who, up until the ratification of the 13th Amendment, were not considered citizens. No Supreme Court case has addressed the issue directly, and it really shouldn't have to. I say this because the intent and language of the 14th Amendment is clear. As always, the solution for most, if not all, of the problems facing the United States is right in front of us. Every solution may be found in our foundational documents, and chief among them is the Constitution. Whenever we stray from the Constitution, it results in detriment to our country at large, yet the devious minions of chaos are more determined now than ever to weaken the constitutional framework of our great republic.
And again, this is, a great day to bring these issues up, because with it being Constitution Day, and in case our listeners haven't caught on yet, you and I pride ourselves on having a working understanding of the Constitution. Again, like I said before, to me, every day is Constitution Day. This is what I'm building my career around. For those of you who may not be aware of it, but I am actually looking at beginning law school here next year, at the beginning of the year next year. And my background is going to be constitutional law. This is something that I've studied for a long time. I read the Constitution every day. I look at various different issues and the applicability of the Constitution with those issues, whether it's legislation, public opinion, Supreme Court rulings, it doesn't matter. I'm always utilizing what I have and the knowledge I have with the Constitution, and I'm finding myself I'm finding out that I'm actually learning more and more every single day just by reading it. I know it well enough. Randy knows it well enough. Our friend Nelson knows it better than anybody that we know. But the fact is, people want to say it's a living document. It's not the Constitution that's the living document. It's the person reading the Constitution and their knowledge and understanding of it growing. That's the living aspect of it. Being able to understand it and learn from it every single day. That's the living aspect of the Constitution. The reader's own understanding, developing, and growing. I learn something new about the Constitution every time I read it. Something I may have missed, overlooked, overread, or not even paid attention to initially. And it's incumbent upon us, knowing our constitutional rights. It is our Constitution. It is our contract with the states and the federal government. We, the people, have ordained it. It is ours. It cannot be taken from us. It should not be taken from us. And with my dying breath, if need be, I will make sure that it is never taken from me or anybody else. Because it is that valuable, it is that tantamount in preserving what our founding fathers had set forth on our behalf. In the preamble it says, we do ordain and establish this Constitution to ourselves and our posterity, our future generations. Again, as I said earlier in the show, one of the fundamental principles and understandings and purposes of why we have the Constitution and why we have the form of government we have in this grand experiment by the Founding Fathers is so that my children and my grandchildren would have a better understanding, a better clarity, a more fruitful and prosperous life than I had. That's what it's for. It's perpetuance exemplified to an exponential degree. So when people want to talk about it being a living document, that is the only way that it can be perceived as a living document. It's living and embodied through the people that have ordained it. The document itself is not living. It is what it is, but it is the means of our country and our way of life, our society, our rule of law being carried out for future generations.
And it absolutely is, and it is based off of that structure of it and the way that the Founding Fathers ensured that it would exist that has guaranteed that it has become the longest contiguously standing Constitution in all world history. And that is explicitly credited to the genius of our Founding Fathers. They truly cared about this country, about its future, and about what sort of system it would be. And that is why it is so important to say that the Constitution is based on natural law. And, of course, when you look at all of the problems afflicting the United States today, almost to a T, every one of them can be traced to some sort of deviation or departure from the United States Constitution. And on this day of days, the Constitution Day, the official day, the day that our country became what it is so wholly important that we focus on these issues. And we here at the Wright Flyer, as always, focus on that and strive to bring you a deeper and better understanding of the Constitution. Because it's not just you that we're educating here. We're educating ourselves every time that we delve into these issues. Because the Constitution itself can never fully be known. Because different factual circumstances apply in different cases, but the framework of it, the way it works, and the way it has always worked, that divinely inspired document is timeless. And that is why we hold the Constitution in such high regard. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the time where we must prepare to touch down. We'll send the flight attendants back to give you one last round of alcohol. And I am Randy Wright, and this was also my first officer, Jeremy Grapington, helping me co-pilot the show today. We want to thank you for tuning in and hope that you will join us again. Thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. We are very fortunate to have you as our audience, and we hope that you've enjoyed the flight as much as we have enjoyed it. So, we'll see you next time.